The moment the transmission crackled through his comms, Leon Graves knew someone had made a mistake. A big one. He sat in the cold, dim-lit war room aboard the TDS Revenant, hands folded, expression carved from stone, as his aide relayed the message again. Drexus Prime Control confirms, sir. 6 human detainees, accused of terrorism, sabotage, and biological warfare. The Zelvari are refusing release. The word sent a slow, dangerous pulse of heat through Leon's veins. His fingers flexed over the armrest of his chair. Biological warfare. His voice was a blade against glass. The aide hesitated, swallowing hard. One of them sneezed on an officer. Silence settled like a storm before impact. Leon exhaled, slow and measured, pressing his fingers against his temple as the weight of the situation sank in. It wasn't diplomats, soldiers, or rogue agents detained on Drexus Prime. It was children, sons and daughters of Terran Dominion officers on an intergalactic field trip, now locked away in a Zelvari cell block like war criminals. His knuckles whitened as he drummed his fingers on the desk, mind already working through the worst-case scenarios. Zelvari diplomacy was rigid, unforgiving. Their laws dictated absolute compliance to their protocols, no matter how ludicrous. A trial would be a farce. A sentence? Unthinkable. He clenched his jaw. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a test. The Zelvari wanted to see how far they could push before humanity pushed back. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Leon stood sharply, his black combat jacket rustling as he turned. Patch me through to their command. A moment later, the screen flickered to life, revealing the smug, elongated face of Overlord Vriras. His multifaceted eyes gleamed with amusement, mandibles twitching in a mockery of a smile. Ah, Commander Graves, we were wondering when the Dominion would respond. Leon's expression remained impassive, but his presence filled the room like a storm cloud ready to burst. Overlord, you have 6 of our civilians detained under fabricated charges. You're going to release them. Now, Vriras clicked his mandibles, feigning contemplation. I'm afraid that won't be possible. These younglings have violated multiple interstellar laws. Their actions, reckless, dangerous, an undeniable threat to our security, cannot go unpunished. Leon's gaze darkened, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. A sneeze is a threat now. You must be shaking in your exoskeleton. The alien bristled, but Leon didn't give him a chance to speak. His voice dropped, steel and fire intertwined. Listen carefully, because I won't repeat myself. You have exactly 1 hour to return those kids unharmed. If you don't, I will personally lead an extraction. And if I have to come down there, Overlord, I won't be negotiating. The screen flickered with static as Vriras tilted his head, chittering in amusement. Bluster. You humans think yourselves so fearsome, but you are still bound by politics, by treaties, by... The screen cut to black before he could finish. Leon had already ended the call. He turned sharply to his officers. Mobilize the fleet. Silent running. No weapons primed. Yet. We give them their hour. He strode toward the exit, grabbing the adamantium-plated combat knife from the table as he passed. If they don't comply, I go in alone. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vega, stepped forward, voice edged with warning. Sir, Drexus Prime is heavily fortified. If you go alone, then I won't have to worry about friendly fire. Leon cut in, sliding the knife into its sheath with a deliberate snap. Those kids have 2 options right now. Wait for diplomacy or pray I get there first, down on Drexus Prime. The detention block pulsed with sterile light as 6 restless human children huddled together inside a containment cell. Danny, the oldest at 10, drummed his fingers on his knees, eyes scanning the room like he was already planning an escape. Lucy, 8, kept glaring at the alien guards like she could set them on fire with willpower alone. This is so stupid, she muttered, arms crossed. All I did was run in the hall. That's not inciting a riot. Max 6 sniffled, rubbing his nose. I just sneezed, he mumbled. They freaked out. Danny glanced toward the security panel by the door. I bet I could hack that. No, you idiot, Lucy whispered. Then they'll really think we're terrorists. But I can hack it. Danny, no. Meanwhile, Overlord Vreeras watched the security footage from the command center, feeling a small twinge of unease. The human children weren't crying, weren't frightened. They were plotting. He shook the feeling off. It didn't matter. The Terrans would bluster, threaten, but in the end, they wouldn't risk war over something so trivial. Would they? On board the TDS Revenant, the countdown hit 30 minutes. Leon stood in the armory, methodically checking his plasma rifle, shock grenades, and close combat gear. Vega stood nearby, tense. Sir, we could still negotiate. Leon locked the rifle into place on his back. I am negotiating. He turned, stepping toward the launch bay. We just speak different languages. Back in the detention block, Danny finally hacked the security panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The kid stared. Danny, you absolute lunatic, Lucy whispered. You actually did it. Max blinked. Are we the bad guys? Shut up, Max, Danny said, dragging them into the hallway. They moved fast, ducking behind storage crates as Zelvari guards patrolled the corridors. One of the kids, Mira, 9, held up a stolen comm device. I, also hacked into their security grid. What? Danny blinked. Why didn't you say that earlier? Mira shrugged. I wanted to see if you could do it first. Alarms blared across Drexus Prime. Overlord Vreeras jolted upright as his security officer shrieked, The prisoners have escaped. The Overlord's mandibles twitched in absolute horror. You're telling me 6 human children overpowered my security forces? Leon Graves got the alert a second later. He read the data burst, then started laughing. Vega paled. Sir, the kids, Leon said, shaking his head in disbelief. They broke themselves out. His grin turned sharp as he activated his drop beacon. Well, I'd hate to be late to the party. The Overlord screen buzzed with another transmission. Leon Graves, now armed and ready for war, stared him down with eyes like a loaded weapon. You had your hour, he said, voice like a death knell. Now it's my turn. And with that, he cut the feed and dropped from orbit. Leon descended fast, the dropship barely a blur in the upper atmosphere before he punched the eject. His boots hit the rooftop of Drexus Prime security sector with a dull thud, and the moment he landed, his rifle was up, his stance fluid. The world below was chaos. Alarms blaring, Zelvari scrambling, red emergency lights pulsing in a rhythmic warning that their so-called prisoners had broken containment. A smirk curled at the edges of his lips. You detained human kids, and now your station's eating itself alive, he muttered, moving swiftly, knife in one hand, rifle in the other. His comm crackled. Sir, we're reading heat signatures all over the security wing. Some of them look like the kids. Leon pressed to the side of the wall, pausing for a brief moment before responding. They broke themselves out. The bugs are scrambling. I'm moving in. He rounded a corner, spotting a Zelvari patrol unit ahead. 3 of them, weapons drawn, exoskeletal frames jittering with unease. They had no idea he was there until it was too late. Leon's knife flashed once. The first alien gurgled as the blade punched into his throat. The second pivoted, but Leon was faster, already pulling his plasma pistol, putting 2 burning rounds straight through the center mass. The third turned to run. Leon let him. Panic was a weapon, and fear would do more damage than a bullet ever could. The security station's corridors were a mess of alien chatter, urgent broadcasts blaring over the intercoms, warnings of insurgents loose inside the base. The fools still thought they were dealing with a coordinated military assault. Leon ducked through a maintenance shaft, moving fast and quiet, his muscles coiled tight as a vice. He checked his watch. 40 minutes since his ultimatum. He was ahead of schedule. The Zelvari weren't prepared for someone like him. Precision, efficiency, a man bred for war. They saw humans as unpredictable, reckless. That was their mistake. War had shaped him into something worse, a shadow of death that moved without hesitation. The Dominion had trained him for deep infiltration, high-risk extraction, and asymmetrical warfare. He would remind them why humans thrived in chaos. His boots barely made a sound as he slipped past another squad. The main control room had to be close. That was where they'd keep the prisoners. Except they weren't prisoners anymore. Were they? His lips twitched again. Down below, the children had already turned the station into a war zone. Lucy, all 8 years of her stubborn defiance, had stolen a plasma baton from an unconscious guard and was now using it like a sword, laughing as she fended off a Zelvari technician who clearly had never been in a fight before. Danny had found his way into the station's security grid, fingers flying over an alien console, overriding security measures without breaking a sweat. "Hey, guys," he called. "I think I just deactivated their entire detention system." "You what?" Mira, 9 years old, barely peered over a barricade, stolen stun pistol clutched in her tiny hands. "I turned off their cells," Danny repeated, eyes wide as he realized what he had done. "I think I just let out everyone." The station shuddered as containment doors all over the lower sectors slid open. Hundreds of detainees, most of them low-threat criminals or political prisoners, spilled into the corridors. Zelvari guards screamed orders, scrambling to control the situation, but it was too late. A riot had begun. Leon caught the first explosion from his vantage point above the security wing. His comm buzzed again. "Commander, station activity has gone critical. You have multiple independent insurgents in the lower wards. The Zelvari are losing control." He smiled, the kind of smile that had sent entire brigades running in the past. "Good. Let them." His target was just ahead. The main control center was sealed with high-tier biometric locks, but Leon Graves had never met a lock he couldn't break or blast open. He set a charge, pressed against the wall, waited for the count, and then, boom! The force of the explosion ripped through the doors, and before the smoke cleared, he was inside, rifle raised. The control room was vast, layered in glowing holoscreens displaying station schematics, red alerts blinking in desperate warning. Vreeras stood at the center, mandibles clicking furiously, his underlings chittering in confusion. When the dust settled and they saw him, the Zelvari leader stiffened. "You," Vreeras spat. "Me," Leon confirmed, stepping forward with predatory ease. His rifle didn't waver. "You had your hour, Overlord. You wasted it." Vreeras' mandibles twitched in agitation. "You cannot simply. I can simply do whatever the hell I want." Leon cut him off, voice razor sharp. "Because right now, my fleet is 10 minutes from turning your station into scrap metal. Your security forces are getting their asses handed to them by children, and you're about to make the smartest or dumbest decision of your life." One of the Zelvari guards lunged. Leon didn't hesitate. He grabbed the insectoid's arm, twisted it with a sickening crack, then drove his knife into the creature's soft underbelly. Vreeras flinched as his subordinate crumpled, wheezing. Leon didn't blink. "Try that again, see what happens." The Overlord hesitated, a flicker of doubt creeping into his many eyes. You are a diplomat." Leon chuckled, shaking his head. "No, Overlord. I'm what happens when diplomacy fails." The station shuddered again. Another explosion rocked the lower levels. His earpiece crackled with Lucy's voice. Mr. Graves, we might have made things worse. Define worse? We may or may not have hijacked a Zelvari battle mech." Leon inhaled slowly, then exhaled. "Of course you did." Vreeras stared at him, horror finally dawning. "Your younglings are demons. Yeah, Leon agreed, tilting his head. And what does that make me? The Overlord gulped, stepping back instinctively. Leon's rifle was still raised, his patience thin. Let them go, he said once more, low and final. Now, Vriras hesitated for only a fraction longer before his trembling claw hit the release sequence. All human detainees released. His voice was barely a whisper. Leon's calm crackled with Danny's voice this time. Doors just unlocked. We're out of here. Good, Leon said. Get topside. I'll meet you at the hangar. He turned back to the Overlord, giving him one last look. Word of advice? Never touch a human kid again. Ever. He raised his rifle, shot out the station's emergency power conduit, and plunged the entire command center into darkness before slipping back into the chaos. As he sprinted toward the extraction point, he couldn't help but grin. Best diplomatic mission he'd ever had. Leon moved through the corridors like a phantom, his steps precise, his breathing controlled, every movement designed for efficiency. His rifle was warm in his hands, fresh from the last engagement. The Zelvari guards had been scrambling, desperate to restore order, but it was already too late. The riot below had turned into an all-out battle. The station was devouring itself from the inside. He keyed into his comms. Vega, Sitrep. The lieutenant's voice came through sharp. Enemy response is fragmented. They're treating this as an insurgency, not an evacuation. Their forces are stretched thin between the riot and the breakout. I'd say you have about 10 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Leon's lips curled into a smirk. Plenty of time. Ahead, the security bay was in chaos. 2 Zelvari officers were yelling at a console, trying to override the lockdown the kids had initiated. They didn't hear him approach. His knife whispered from its sheath, his movements liquid. The first never knew what hit him. A clean strike under the jaw, severing vital systems. The second turned, mandibles clicking in alarm, reaching for his weapon. Leon caught his wrist, twisted, and drove the alien's own blade into his carapace. He let the body slump as he took the guard's key card, sliding it through the console. The doors hissed open. The security wing lay beyond. He keyed his comm again. I'm in. Where are the kids? They made it to the hangar. Mostly, Danny's got control of their security grid, but Lucy's pinned down near the upper catwalks. Looks like she ran ahead to secure transport and got cut off. That's my girl, Leon muttered, already moving. Lucy was tenacious, too much like her mother. Leon had known her since she was born, the daughter of one of his closest friends, a legacy of the war-torn generation. She had that same fire in her eyes, the same refusal to back down. If she was pinned, she wouldn't be waiting for rescue. She'd be looking for a way to win. He reached the maintenance tunnels, cutting through the auxiliary power conduits to avoid the bulk of enemy reinforcements. His HUD pinged a distress beacon, Lucy's emergency transponder. He moved faster. Lucy crouched behind a cargo crate, her borrowed plasma pistol shaking slightly in her hands. 3 Zelvari troopers were sweeping the catwalk, their weapons raised, their movements slow and methodical. They knew she was there. They were just waiting for her to make a mistake. She gritted her teeth. Her heart pounded. The last few minutes had been a blur, running, hiding, shooting when she had to. She had managed to take one of them down before they cornered her here. Now she was out of options. She sucked in a breath, steadying herself, fingers tightening on the grip of her stolen weapon. Maybe if she timed it right, she could take one more down before they got her. A shadow dropped from above, a blur of motion. The first Zelvari's head snapped back as a knife drove into his throat. The second barely had time to register before a gunshot split the air. The third turned to run, but a heavy boot crashed into his chest, sending him sprawling. Leon stood over him, the barrel of his rifle aimed steady. The alien froze. Leon tilted his head. Run. The Zelvari didn't hesitate. He scrambled to his feet and bolted down the corridor. Leon turned to Lucy. "You all right, kid?" She nodded, swallowing hard, eyes still wide. I had it handled." He smirked. "Of course you did." He offered a hand. She took it. "Come on. The others are waiting." The hangar was a war zone. The Zelvari forces had regrouped, rallying for a final stand. Danny and the rest of the kids had barricaded themselves inside a commandeered transport shuttle, using the ship's defense systems to hold the line. Mira had taken over one of the secondary turrets, her tiny hands barely able to work the controls as she fired potshots at the encroaching soldiers. Max, the youngest, was clinging to a rifle twice his size, his face set in a scowl of pure determination. Danny was yelling over the comms. "Where the hell are you guys? We're running out of time." "Almost there," Leon responded, gripping Lucy's wrist as they sprinted through the chaos. A squad of Zelvari spotted them. Plasma fire erupted. Leon shoved Lucy behind cover, returning fire in controlled bursts. 2 went down. The rest ducked behind cargo containers. He switched to his sidearm, tossed a shock grenade over the barricade. A second later, the blast sent the remaining guards convulsing to the ground. He pulled Lucy forward. They ran. The transport's loading ramp was already down. Vega's voice crackled through the ship's comms. "We've got a problem. The hangar bay doors are locked. We're not getting out unless someone overrides the manual controls." "Let me guess," Leon muttered, already moving. "The controls are on the far side of the hangar." "Bingo. Hold position." He sprinted, ducking behind wreckage, weaving through the chaos. The Zelvari were in full panic now, some firing wildly, others retreating, unsure whether they were fighting a military force or something far worse. He reached the control panel, skidding to a stop. His fingers flew over the console. Emergency overrides. Manual disengage. The locks flickered, then disengaged. The hangar doors groaned as they began to slide open. Leon turned back. "Vega, get them out of here." The transport's engines roared to life. The ship lifted, its thrusters burning hot as it angled for escape. Danny's voice cracked through the speakers. "We got it. We're clear." Leon exhaled, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. Then a shadow loomed behind him. Vriras. The Overlord moved fast for his size, his blade flashing. Leon barely dodged, the edge slicing a shallow cut across his arm. He retaliated with a punch to the alien's gut, driving his elbow into Vriras' head. The Zelvari staggered but didn't fall. "You think you can simply walk away from this?" Vriras hissed, his mandibles clicking in rage. "You have no idea what you've done." Leon wiped the blood from his arm, rolling his shoulders. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done." He lunged. The fight was brutal, fast, blade against blade, fists against armor. Vriras was strong, but Leon was stronger. He drove his knee into the alien's side, twisted his wrist, and sent Vriras' weapon clattering to the floor. The Overlord gasped, his body slumping. Leon pressed his boot against his chest, leveling his gun. "You ever touch a human again," he said coldly, "and I will finish what I started." He turned, leaving the Overlord where he lay. The transport hovered just above the hangar floor, waiting for him. He sprinted for the ramp, leaping as the ship began to ascend. Lucy and Danny grabbed his arms, hauling him inside. The doors slammed shut. The engines burned. The ship shot into the void, leaving the burning wreckage of Drexus Prime behind them. Silence filled the cabin, then laughter. Danny punched Leon's arm. "Holy shit, that was insane." Mira grinned. "We totally won, right?" Lucy exhaled, shaking her head. "That was awesome." Leon leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment. Then he smirked. "Yeah, we won." Vega's voice crackled through the comms. "Sir, Dominion fleet is en route. What are your orders?" Leon opened his eyes, staring at the stars. Tell them to stand down. We're bringing our kids home. Leon slumped into the pilot's seat, muscles aching, adrenaline still thrumming beneath his skin. The cabin was filled with the sound of heavy breathing, laughter, and the faint hum of the ship's stabilizers. The kids were still running high on the chaos they had just left behind, their faces a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. Lucy wiped a streak of dirt from her cheek, grinning as she nudged Danny. "Told you we'd make it," Danny scoffed, still gripping the edge of his seat. "Barely." Mira chuckled from where she sat, swinging her legs over the edge of a crate. "We took down an entire alien security force and stole a ship. We're basically war heroes." Max, the youngest, puffed his chest. "I shot a plasma cannon." Leon let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "I really hope that part doesn't make it into the official report." The comms crackled, Vega's voice sharp and professional. "Sir, Dominion fleet is en route. ETA 5 minutes. They're asking for a full status report." Leon exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Tell them the objective is secured. No casualties. And we may or may not have caused an intergalactic diplomatic incident." There was a pause before Vega responded, her tone carrying the barest hint of amusement. "Understood, sir. I'll prepare the damage control statements." Leon smirked. "Good. And make sure High Command knows that if they don't want this happening again, they should stop sending our kids on field trips to hostile alien stations." The ship rumbled as it slipped past the outer perimeter of Drexus Prime. The station was still burning, plumes of fire and smoke visible even from orbit. Leon knew the Zelvari were scrambling to contain the mess, to erase the embarrassment of having their security breached by a handful of human children and one very pissed-off war veteran. He leaned back, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. It wasn't over yet. There would be political fallout, damage control, and no doubt a mountain of paperwork waiting for him when they got back. But the mission was complete. The kids were safe. That was all that mattered. Danny swiveled in his seat, looking at Leon with wide, eager eyes. "So, how much trouble are we in?" Leon raised an eyebrow. "You mean you—" Danny gulped. Yeah." Leon gave him a long look, then glanced around at the rest of them. Each of these kids had just survived something no one their age should have. They had fought, adapted, and refused to break under pressure. They had proven exactly why humanity was feared across the galaxy. He sighed, shaking his head. "You're all getting medals." Max gasped. "For real?" "For real," Leon confirmed. "You think High Command is going to let a story like this go? The galaxy's already afraid of us. What do you think they'll do when they hear that our kids hijacked a Zelvari war mech and held off an entire security force?" Lucy grinned. "They'll never mess with us again." Leon smirked. "Exactly." The ship's comms flared to life, a stern, authoritative voice cutting through the static. "This is Admiral Kovacs of the TDS Titan, unidentified vessel. Identify yourself immediately." Leon leaned forward, pressing the comm switch. "Relax, Admiral. It's me." A pause. Then, "Graves, in the flesh, what the hell did you do?" "What I had to." Another silence, longer this time. Then a weary sigh. "Bring her in, Commander. And for the love of all that's holy, please tell me this won't start a war." Leon smirked, watching the Terran fleet come into view, the sight of the Dominion's warships filling the viewport like a promise. "No guarantees, sir. But I'd say they'll think twice before they try something like this again." The docking process was smooth, but the moment the ship's ramp lowered, they were met with an army of officers, medics, and analysts waiting to debrief. The kids were ushered away for checkups, still buzzing with excitement. Leon strode forward, coming face to face with Admiral Kovacs, whose expression was a mixture of exasperation and reluctant admiration. "I should have you court-martialed," Kovacs muttered. "And yet here we are," Leon replied smoothly. The Admiral narrowed his eyes. You just dismantled one of the Zelvari's most secure outposts, single-handedly sparked an uprising, and humiliated an entire alien government. Do you have any idea how much paperwork I'm going to have to deal with? Leon shrugged. Could be worse. Could have been an actual war. Kovacs rubbed his temples. You're impossible. I prefer efficient. One of the senior officers approached, holding a datapad. Sir, reports from Drexus Prime indicate that the Zelvari are currently in full lockdown. No official retaliation yet, but intelligence suggests they're trying to cover up the entire incident. Kovacs snorted. Of course they are. They can't afford to admit that human children outmaneuvered them. The officer hesitated. There's one more thing. Our intelligence team intercepted a transmission. Before we left the system, he handed the datapad to Kovacs. The Admiral's face darkened as he read. Then he looked up at Leon. Vriras issued an order before we extracted. A standing directive for all Zelvari forces. Leon crossed his arms. And Kovacs exhaled sharply. From now on, all human juveniles are to be classified as high-risk assets. They've reclassified our children as threats. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Leon's face. Good. The Admiral stared at him. Good. Means they're afraid. Leon turned, walking toward the observation deck, gazing out at the stars beyond. The Zelvari had learned a lesson today, one they wouldn't soon forget. Humanity wasn't just a species of warriors. It was a species that bred warriors. Even in their youngest, even in their most vulnerable, there was defiance, there was resilience, there was fire. And now the entire galaxy knew it. He smirked, watching as the Dominion fleet shifted into formation, the weight of their presence an unspoken warning to any who would challenge them. Let them be afraid. Leon stood at the edge of the observation deck, arms crossed, his reflection cast against the cold void of space. The Dominion fleet hovered in perfect formation, their presence a declaration of authority, a message sent across the stars that humanity was not to be trifled with. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the mission finally settling in his bones. Behind him, the sounds of rushed footsteps echoed as Admiral Kovacs approached. The Zelvari just sent an official communiqué. They're calling this an unfortunate misunderstanding. Leon smirked, not turning around. Misunderstanding. That's cute. What do they want? Kovacs sighed, rubbing his temples. They're offering reparations, diplomatic apologies, an agreement that no human child will ever be detained again under Zelvari jurisdiction. They want to sweep this under the rug as quickly as possible. Leon finally turned, eyes sharp. And what's our official response? Kovacs gave him a tired look. What do you think? High Command is milking this for every ounce of leverage we can get. The Zelvari will be licking their wounds for decades. We've got intelligence reports indicating half their leadership is furious at Vriras for humiliating them. Leon chuckled, shaking his head. They should be. He let 6 kids tear apart his station, and then had to watch me walk out of his command center without lifting a damn finger. The entire galaxy knows what happened. It's not something they'll forget. Kovacs crossed his arms, his voice turning serious. And what about you, Graves? I don't have to tell you that your little stunt is going to have ripple effects. Leon's expression didn't waver. It was never a stunt. It was a message that humanity is a threat, that humanity doesn't kneel. Kovacs studied him for a long moment before exhaling. High Command agrees. They're putting you in for a commendation. Not that you care about medals. Leon smirked. Not particularly. But I'm sure the kids will enjoy theirs. Kovacs gestured toward the med bay. Speaking of which, you should see them. They've been asking for you. Leon nodded, his boots echoing against the steel floor as he made his way down the corridor. The med bay was a flurry of activity, doctors scanning the children, running diagnostics, ensuring they were unharmed. The moment he stepped inside, He was met with grins, laughter, and wide, eager eyes. Lucy was sitting on a med cot, arms crossed, looking as if she had just won a championship fight. Danny was arguing with one of the doctors about whether or not his hacking had technically been illegal if he had done it in self-defense. Mira was still marveling over how much destruction they had caused, while Max was telling anyone who would listen about how he had piloted a Zelvari battle mech. Leon leaned against the doorway, smirking. "You all caused this much trouble on field trips, or am I just lucky?" Danny grinned. "We're trendsetters." Lucy rolled her eyes. "We saved ourselves, you know. You just cleaned up at the end." Leon chuckled. "That's what I heard. You think I should be thanking you?" Mira nodded seriously. Obviously, he shook his head in amusement. "Then I suppose I'll just have to make sure your medals say mission leaders instead of rescues." That got their attention. Max gasped. "We're actually getting medals?" "Damn right you are," Leon said, folding his arms. "You turned an entire Zelvari security station inside out. You outmaneuvered, outthought, and outfought an enemy force 3 times your size. You embarrassed one of the most arrogant species in the galaxy and walked away without a scratch. That's a victory if I've ever seen one." Lucy grinned. "So, we're war heroes now." "Not yet," Leon said, smirking. "You're still kids, but give it a few years." Vega's voice crackled over the comms. "Commander, there's a secure transmission waiting for you in the war room." "High Command. Looks important." Leon exhaled. "It always is." He gave the kids a final nod before turning back toward the hallway. "Get some rest. Next time someone tries to take you, I expect you to handle it yourselves." Danny saluted mockingly. "Yes, sir." Leon snorted, shaking his head as the doors hissed shut behind him. The war room was dim-lit, the screen already activated as High Command's council members appeared in holographic form. They all wore the same unreadable expressions, their gazes sharp, analytical. The highest-ranking officer, Fleet Marshal Rennick, leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Commander Graves, Fleet Marshal, you know why we're here?" Leon smirked. "Because I made your jobs harder." A few of them chuckled. Rennick didn't. "Because you just altered the balance of power in the sector. Do you have any idea how significant this event was?" "I have a few guesses." "The Zelvari are rattled. More than rattled. They're scared. And scared enemies make mistakes. High Command intends to use this to our advantage." Leon nodded. "So what's next?" Rennick's gaze sharpened. "We want you to lead an expanded operations unit specializing in high-risk extractions and psychological warfare. You just proved that one man, one human, can shift the battlefield without ever declaring war. We want more of that." Leon considered it. "You're talking about Black Ops." "You were already doing Black Ops," Rennick said smoothly. "We're just making it official. And if I say no, you won't. And if I say yes, then you become the sharpest blade in our arsenal." Leon exhaled slowly, looking past them, past the screens, past the war room. His mind wasn't in this conversation anymore. It was back on Drex's Prime, standing over Vriras, watching the realization of defeat dawn in the Overlord's multifaceted eyes. It was in the hangar, watching the kids rise to the occasion, proving that humanity's strength wasn't just in its soldiers, but in its very nature. He knew what needed to be done. He looked back at Rennick, his decision already made. "Fine, but I do it my way." "You always do." The transmission ended, the room falling into silence. Leon leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a long moment before chuckling to himself. Humanity didn't kneel, and now neither would he.